We're back for another pod. Back after Oklahoma kind of trounced Arkansas State in week one, back before SMU, and I'm back with Guerin Emig shortly, like less than 7 days after you picked TCU to win the Big 12 title, and I picked Clemson for the college football playoff. So, Guerin, what does that tell anybody here who is going to listen to us talk about football with our expertise for the next 30 minutes?
This doesn't have to be about football, right? We don't have to stick to football every week we do this.
Maybe we shouldn't, given our early track record in 2023.
What do they say about the first week, man? You can pass no final judgment based on one game. I still have faith in both the Frogs and the LSU Tigers, who I picked, not that you brought it up, who I picked to make the playoff.
Well, that's going to come up later, but we're back. Another episode of the Lederman Jacket. OU 1-0. We were both in Norman on Saturday, and we saw Oklahoma really tear through Arkansas State. To me, maybe the biggest story of the day, not Oklahoma related, was just how bad Arkansas State looked. That really surprised me. I think most people would have expected the outcome, but from minute one, just how easy it looked for Oklahoma. And you heard Butch Jones afterward. And I actually covered Butch Jones briefly in Jonesboro back in the day of about 3 years ago. And it was the most candid he'd ever been, just basically saying this. Sounded a bit like Brian Kelly saying this is not the football team I thought we had, except at a very different level and on a very different day. But we're not going to harp too much. The game was a few days ago, but we were there. So we're just going to run through a few, kind of what struck you, lingering questions, and what we enjoyed most on the day. And I'll start on what struck me about Oklahoma's opener, and it's an easy place to start, and all of this should be with a grain of salt because of what we saw from Arkansas State. But it was the quarterback play. I thought Dillon Gabriel was really sharp on a day that he didn't have to make a statement and to open in a certain way, but didn't hurt that he was really good and looked again against an Arkansas State secondary that we'll see how it translates these next few weeks and months, but he was more accurate than he was last year. He seemed in control and he looked really good. And if there's going to be a portion of the fan base there at Owen Field waiting to start chanting for Jackson Arnold, certainly didn't hurt the way he got started. And then Jackson Arnold came in and looked really impressive himself. He was poised, he was calm, he threw well, he ran well. I know Barry Trammell, our colleague, wrote a column about he compared him to Blake Bell and that this could be their goal line quarterback, anything like that. But a good start for the quarterback play, good start for the offense, and I think that's all you could ask for if you're an OU fan.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, Eli, that really Oklahoma needs to be concerned with Oklahoma. And that even goes for this weekend against SMU. And part of that is they even if they play well, they're going to beat SMU. This is a better team than Arkansas State, a better opponent, there's no doubt. But if the Sooners play well, they're going to be 3-0 coming out of non-conference and going into the Big 12, which is exactly where they were a year ago. And if there's a lesson we learned from a year ago is don't go overboard on how a team looks out of the gate. That you get all caught up in this romantic idea that Brent Venables was the right man at the right time for the right job, and then all of a sudden it's 10 weeks later and the team is suffering a 6-7 losing season. And so what you want to see is not so much the final score if you're an OU fan, and that went for Saturday, and then we'll go for this weekend against SMU and beyond at Tulsa, but some things that the team did that it didn't do when last we saw it a year ago. And the things that popped out to me, if Arnold's and Gabriel's performances were sort of the headliners, or Jaden Gibson's 2 circus catches were, right, or the Kanai Walker forcing the fumble by ripping the ball away from the guy who had it for Arkansas State. The other things that we needed to look for were consistent blocking by the offensive line, whether the new tackles, Tyler Guyton and Walter Rouse could pick up where Anton Harrison and Wanye Morris left off a year ago. You wanted to look for even on a thunderbolt like Gavin Freeman's 82-yard punt return, and you wrote about Gavin before leaving the stadium Saturday night, is dynamic a play that Freeman made. There were 2 blocks that occurred en route that should have, I think, got just as much attention because, again, those went into the file of little things that you look for a team doing. Shane Witter had one at the outset of the return, and then he got one from It wasn't Marcus Major, but he wore number 24.
Come on.
And since I don't have a roster in front of me, and since the portal and newcomers jack with old habits and references, I'm just going to call him the other number 24 and apologize to the kid and fix that next week. But the point being, it was two really well executed, well drilled, well technique blocks that got Freeman going on that punt return. And that's what you want to see if you're an Oklahoma fan. You want to see stride for stride coverage on a deep ball. If Arkansas State's quarterback couldn't complete a pass between me and the water fountain 10 feet away from me here at Owen Field, well, that's Butch Jones' problem. Forget that from an OU perspective. How was the coverage, right? And the coverage was good consistently on Saturday.
So good that you couldn't even find Samuel Omasigo's name.
You didn't know that either until you just, while I was rambling, you looked it up, and
you have no way of knowing that. None at all.
What's his name? Say it one more time. Sam
Omasigo. Don't test me on the pronunciations. Our buddy Eric Bailey, it's one thing. I got those down, and I got this one down, and that was the biggest play of his college career to date. I mean, it was his college debut, so there you go. And you couldn't even bother to find his number.
I'll be writing Sam's family I'll be sending them a gift basket and writing a heartfelt letter of apology after this podcast.
Well, that's some of what we kind of learned the other day. What questions do you still have? I mean, there's a million. But if you came away with any one concrete one, can be specific, but what are you still left wondering about?
Is the OU fan base going to be able to control itself over the Jackson Arnold hype? Let's start there. Right?
That's plenty reasonable because he looked good. I mean, they talk a lot about layups in this system.
Yeah,
Jeff Lebby loves that word, and they certainly they gave him plenty. That's not to diminish, but he made the throws. I think what you'd say. Yeah. He was good and he was sharp. He ran well. Afterward, we were talking to Jackson, and he kind of explained that, and Jeff Lebby had given some insight into this too. Was that he kind of wanted to get roughed up, and Jeff Lebby wanted him to get roughed up, and they were on the sidelines before the second or third series. One of them he ran pretty heavily, and I guess they were on the sideline phone talking, and Jeff Lebby said, Jackson said, I'd like to take a couple hits. And Jeff said, we can do that for you, no problem. And so that was kind of the cool confidence in the whole thing from him. It was an impressive debut. I liked afterward he got asked by someone in the media contingent, what distinguishes you from Dillon Gabriel? What makes you different? What do you do better than him? And he kind of, I wasn't surprised by this, but backed away a bit and just said, we're pretty similar. There's no things that are different. Really, I think Jackson might have been a little humble. I think he can run a bit better. He's a bit bigger, but he's very committed to this process. And I'd learned that when I reported on him in the past, talked to folks in his life, and you hear from Jeff Lebby and Dillon Gabriel. He's committed to his role right now and the thing he's doing right now. And he more than anything passed his first test against Arkansas State. As a result, your question stands: how long are people going to be patient about it? Perhaps only as long as Dillon Gabriel's accuracy kind of holds up.
Yeah. I'm going to be curious to see about the injury status of the two guys that got nicked up a little bit. Drake Stoops, who had 4 catches.
He was electric early on. I mean, it was the second series of the game he came on. It felt like he was out there a lot longer, but 4 catches for 50-some-odd yards, I think, in the first 2 series, including a touchdown.
Yeah.
Then came off hurt. And then Son Bella, you mentioned.
Yeah.
I guess we heard from Brent Venables this morning, recording on a Tuesday. They feared maybe a high ankle sprain. It wasn't that, but we saw Deshaun in a boot on his left foot Saturday. Saw him again in one in practice last night. Mm-hmm. So those are the 2 question marks. Davis Bevel, of course, as well. Going to be out maybe a week or 2 and to kind of a nasty hit. But those first 2, Deshaun McCullough, Drake Stoops, are the important ones.
Yeah, real quick, and not just because the fact that they're going to play big roles for him. Don't let the depth chart distract you. Credit Justin Harrington for getting the start at the cheetah position ahead of McCullough, but that guy is going to matter. Right, he's too good a player not to make a difference in Oklahoma this year. I'm talking about McCullough. He'll play a lot if he's healthy. And the thing about ankles and the thing about shoulders, Stoops has a shoulder injury, McCullough an ankle injury, is those are sort of tender joints, right? And if as coaches and staff at Oklahoma downplay the significance short term of both injuries, it's something to remember moving forward, because shoulders and ankles tend to heal fussily, if I can apply
That's a
that.
good word. Is
Yeah,
that
I'm looking. I was going to pull an adverb out of
yeah?
my freshman year English class at Booker T, but I'll go with fussily. So I'm not saying ACL. That of course means we're having a whole different discussion. I am saying that, considering the importance of both those players to OU's fortunes on both sides of the ball, just something to file away for future reference. That's all.
Well, fusilli is a nice pasta shape if you've ever indulged.
I have no idea what you're talking. No idea what you're talking about.
Well, one of these days. One of these days.
That's a
Well,
Gen Z. It must be a Gen Z food
oh yeah.
staple.
Okay.
You guys
Well,
eating a lot of you guys eating a lot of fusilli? See, when I was growing up, Eli, we called it pasta.
well, it's a pasta type. It's like spaghetti or bucatini or linguine and fusilli. Come on.
You're showing off, man. It's all you're doing. That is all you're doing.
Well, you are right. You know, you made that point about Hassan McCullough. Surely he's going to be important. I think what fascinated me, they weren't on the field a lot together because Hassan McCullough didn't last all that long in this game before he came off injured.
Right.
You're going to see both of those guys at Cheetah. I'm maybe most intrigued for whatever scheme and setup that has them both out there. Maybe one in a Cheetah role, but you
Sure.
guess there, like Harrington maybe plays it because he's got the coverage range in his back pocket. But Hassan McCullough is a guy that's different than anything they had a year ago in terms of that versatility as a linebacker. I mean, he'll play Cheetah, but I think we know he can play up on the line. We know he can play linebacker. He can drop into coverage. That to me feels like an X factor type of weapon. Justin Harrington's going to fit that role really well. They don't have many guys, and they didn't have many guys last year or any like Hassan McCullough. And so it is, that's going to be a spot to watch. This defense that has so much riding with it and a lot right now of great momentum, a lot of that rests on those shoulders. And so they're going to need to see where he's at, whether it's this week and maybe managing, when you really need him. Do they need him for SMU and Tulsa?
Right.
We don't know the details or anything like that, but we know when they will need him.
Yep.
So I'll be curious to see how they manage it. Guerin, this morning we were with Brent Venables. 12 hours, a little more than that, after Clemson, his old stomping ground, took a right old beating on the Duke football field. That's a rarity there. Usually happens in Cameron Indoor, not
right.
at was it Wallace Wade Stadium. Not
you would have known. You would have known that if you hadn't gone and checked fuselage as your pasta.
Well, anyhow, Brent's old buddy Dabo Sweeney kind of got the Clemson. My CFP pick got handed a big old slice of humble pie.
Yes,
and what a lot of folks kind of came out and said afterward, and pointing out a lot of things, in addition to Garrett Riley, Lincoln's brother, not having a sterling debut there as an offensive coordinator, was the fact that Dabo has kind of stiff-armed the transfer portal. And while so many other coaches have welcomed it, and we saw it on the opening weekend of the college football season, see Deion Sanders, most of all, see Florida State, that Clemson has basically stiff-armed this thing that everyone else has to some degree embraced. And maybe it's showing, and you kind of peppered Brent on his philosophy, and you were very tactful. But he's had some interesting stuff to say about the portal, and for a team that itself has certainly used the portal in the last 20 months to revamp this program a bit at OU.
Right, and I wrote about the topic. Check it out, selloutcrowd.com, guerinemig.com, by the way. We're not above shilling, and we won't, no, not even close to above shilling. We'll be shilling for a while here at Sellout Crowd until everyone gets used to us. But yeah, no, that was something I wrote about today, Eli, is that it felt like a pretty decent time to revisit the topic with Venables. And again, he's made his feelings public. This wasn't the first time he mentioned that there are things he didn't like about the portal, and sort of knee-jerk to old school ideas of sticking it out, right, and not making a rash decision, and the grass isn't always greener, and I think the way he put it was, this is me as a 52-year-old having perspective that maybe 18, 19, and 20-year-olds don't, and that's fine, and I don't blame Venables for going there. I salute his principles. He's one of many coaches who believe that if entitlement's too strong a word, it's a word that I think Mike Gundy uses a little bit in Stillwater, old friend of yours. It's a feeling, right? Coaches feel that that the portal has only amped up the sense of entitlement, NIL for that matter, as well. But anyway, but there's the fact that it's affecting games, right? If Colorado doesn't beat TCU without not just Deion Sanders being coach, but without Deion bringing in 49 transfers, including a couple of pretty good ones with him from his old job at Jackson State. Maybe Clemson is able to handle Duke if Dabo Swinney has more than one transfer on his roster. I don't cover Clemson, so I'm not tracking the numbers over there, but according to those who do, the only transfer that Swinney brought in this past offseason was a quarterback from Arizona State who I'd never heard of. He's the backup to Klubnik at Clemson. And so I think the way the game is played anymore, Eli, catches up with the guy even as one as established and successful as Dabo Swinney. And so what I'm asking Brent Venables is for not just your personal feelings on the portal, which again, he's publicized, not real comfortable with it clearly, but that you have to use the tool and adapt. And he's, I think, finding the balance there, right? We saw it in the OU starting lineup against Arkansas State. 3 of the defensive linemen who started the game were playing elsewhere a year ago. That just happens to be the soft spot from OU's defense, maybe OU's roster during the 6-7 2022 campaign. He's starting Andrell Anthony at wide receiver, guy from Michigan. His left tackle is Walter Rouse from Stanford, and so coach doesn't have to agree with everything that goes into kids jumping into the portal, but they can't, right? They can't ignore it, and they can't just rely on organically developed program anymore, not the way the game has changed, and expect to have the same results. That's the point. And I think OU fans can be happy with the fact and comfortable with the fact that Venables is finding a median between his personal feelings and how the portal can benefit him professionally. And that was the point of the questions and the point of the column I just filed.
I think that's what you want to hear if you're an OU fan, because in a sense, without getting too dramatic, but at Clemson, it's a fan base and a program being held hostage to a degree by someone who's not willing to at least find that balance, right? You can have the feelings, and I like Brent used a different term. Entitlement comes up, or particularly when you're up in Stillwater with Mike Gundy, this generation. That's how a lot of sentences start. This generation.
Yeah, right.
What Brent said today, what struck me, he said we don't give them a lot of chances to pause, and he's right. And there's a lot of opportunities not to pause. If you're not happy in a situation, portal's right there, and we see it every year. We see success stories. No one's done a proper accounting of this, but I would guess more stories that don't end well. Just, a guy hits the portal thinking the grass will be greener, and it's not there. The opportunities are not there. But it's as much on this generation, put it in quotes, as it is the setup and the fact that there are programs out there who are actively recruiting guys on rosters to enter the portal and come to their schools. And so it kind of runs both ways. But if you're an OU fan, you've got a coach who has proven it in the last 2 years. I mean, that he's willing to at least embrace this for the sake of getting them up and running. And that's what he's done. We know he doesn't want to build a program through the portal, but you look at just this year's team in this offseason alone, 10 defenders who we saw on Saturday from the portal on offense. Andrell Anthony, Brennan Thompson will be out there, Walter Rouse. If you go back to last year, you're talking about McCade Matoyer, you're talking about Dillon Gabriel. They have built much of the spine of the team that you're going to see this year through the portal. And could you imagine if they had, if Brent had kind of kept that philosophy that Dabo seemed to have at Clemson, we'd be probably having very different conversations about the heights that this team could reach this year, about where they're headed. And I think it would be next to impossible for Oklahoma to be heading to the SEC in a year saying they're going to be competitive, but not hitting the portal that way. So I think there should be some, I guess, I don't know about gratitude, but again, I don't know how you'd feel if you're a Clemson fan today and you're feeling as though your program's under the thumb of a guy who's done great things there, but doesn't seem all that ready to embrace the future.
Yep. One more thing I'll say on the topic, something again that Venables alluded to is that, there are different ways that you use the portal to your advantage if you're a coach. One is to fortify weaknesses, and that's kind of what's going on this year, right? I mean, the defensive line is a classic example. He doesn't have DJ Terry and Trace Ford and Rondell Bothroyd starting that game Saturday. If the D line was a better, stronger part of his defense a year ago. And number two, out of necessity, if you get to, and this sort of goes to Dillon at Colorado, you arrive at a job and players have fled for one reason or another. He takes over for Lincoln Riley. Didn't matter that he said a lot of the right things when he took that job. Guys had sort of made up their minds, right? Caleb Williams, case in point. They were going to either go with Lincoln out to SC or go elsewhere to play football. And so you've got to do something to just fill spots on the depth chart. Thus, Dillon Gabriel, he's a pretty good quarterback. But they go out and get Gabriel because Caleb Williams leaves. And so either way, what you want to hear, if you're an OU fan, is the coach being alert enough and not so stubborn that he's going to use the rules to his advantage. And that's what Venables is onto, I think, right now at Oklahoma.
One just quick Venables stat, as we're talking about Clemson and all that, came out after last night. Dabo Swinney, 40-23 without Brent Venables as his defensive coordinator, as head coach of Clemson. With him, 121-17. Brent deserves a lot of credit for what he did with the defense there, of course. Goes without saying. I'd also say that time coincided with Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, some of the finest running back talent that has come out of that university, some incredible wide receivers. So a lot of folks getting play out of that in Norman today, maybe a bit of selective, some math there, but an interesting thing. But speaking of transfers, Walter Rouse. Now, Guerin, us in the media, we're pretty easy to win over, right? If you're like personable enough, you have no problem getting some play from media members, leaving an availability saying best interview on the team. Wow. Walter Rouse took it up to a new level last night. This Stanford transfer, left tackle, has really been a joy to talk to since he's arrived in January, but he might have wrapped up the Media Cooperation Award in week 2 last night, Guerin, with a legendary session, went like 35 minutes.
Wow.
The topics covered, it wound up at a certain point, it was just me, our colleague Jenny Carlson, Ryan Aber from the Oklahoman, who we were just chatting. And at a certain point, I gave up on anything I wanted to ask him because the conversation was just good enough. Here's a list of the topics covered over in this session. This is not all of them, but we talked about Legos with Walter Rouse. We talked about Star Wars, comic books, Maryland crabs. It's where he's from originally versus California, like Bay crabs, where he was at Stanford. Chicken fried steak, and a discovery he's quite enjoyed.
I was going to say, surely he'd not eaten that before he came to Oklahoma.
No, but then this takes us to the next thing. His aspirations in the medical field, because chicken fried steak, eat too many, you might need organ transplants, as he talked about. He'd like to get into that field. He's done 3D printing stuff with artificial organs at Stanford.
Wow.
He would like at some point to host a man versus food style show. Walter, NIL, let's get this, you and me, we'll eat all over Oklahoma. He did a blacksmithing internship at Stanford. This I knew about, but I need to learn more about. He told us about his fiance, who sounds perhaps even smarter and more accomplished than him, or at least ahead on the degree schedule to get like a 4th or 5th degree. Things, Guerin, you and me, we never even considered. And then lastly, this is maybe the coolest anecdote of all, and a string I'm going to tug on at some point. Walter Rouse's grandfather, Vic Rouse, was on the Loyola Chicago Ramblers 1963 and hit the game-winning shot against Cincinnati to win the 1963 national title.
Wow, no kidding.
And so we learned a whole lot. And, I know you appreciate this, and maybe some folks out there will, but, as in what we do every day as reporters, all we ever really are looking for are moments like that.
Yeah.
We can peel back the curtains on someone, and opportunities come few and far between for a lot of reasons. But the reason I think this was such an enjoyable thing was not that he spent that time out there or anything like that, but that for 20 minutes there, I'd say we really just had a conversation with Walter, and it was a joy. And it's one of the things in this job that I know you and I both really do enjoy when we get the chance.
Yeah, Eli, one of the things you're going to hear a lot from me on this show and on the ones that I host at Sellout Crowd Mind games, by the way. Again, we're not above. We're not above.
You've
My
gotten
brother.
good.
This is a topic I'll explore repeatedly as a columnist. These guys are people, right? And it's not just players; it's coaches. You're right. The best interviews I've ever had as a sports writer, whether columnist, beat writer, whatever, they weren't interviews; they were conversations where you learn something about the person that you can present to the players' fans, so that the fans then see them as more than players but people, because that's not happening enough, man. It just isn't. I mean, this point was driven home with a sledgehammer during the pandemic, when everyone was going crazy, and people were jumping all over each other, and just this tension, and it was bad, right? And then everyone came back to school to play football, and somewhere along the way, we needed to grasp the fact that this was a pretty heroic thing they were doing, and to give themselves some relief, right? Because they were going through it same as everybody else, but also to give us, the public, something to sort of enjoy, which is watching a football game. But I mean, it manifests itself when other things pop up, and it could be a social movement, it could be an election. It could be an issue related to the university that these guys attend, or a class that they take. And you find out that they have thoughts and ideas and opinions, same as everyone else. And that's where it should drive a stake into the stick to sports crowd. That should have been driven in a long time ago, but it's not just political, social, and all that stuff. It's to me, stick to sports is denying these players the rights to present themselves as people, right? That's what this comes down to. And so your session with Walter Rouse underscores the importance of windows into these guys that show us who they are, not how they play. How they play is great. How they play is cool. Made it 85,000 fans in the stadium where I'm doing the show with you very happy Saturday. That's wonderful. Doesn't hurt, though, to get to know about the person as they leave the field or the stadium and go about their weekend. And I think it does that player a service to learn about the person, because there are more dimensions than one, and we've got to land on that when it comes to sports and college sports here in Oklahoma.
It's beautifully put, and we really did learn a lot about Walter last night, and beyond any of the fun topics, Legos, comic books. He told a story about an aunt he had who was born with Down syndrome, was told, her mother was told, she may have, weeks to live. She lived to be 53 years old.
Wow.
Worked in the State Department, held a job there. And, he explained that's one of his sources for smiling. That's how he put it. That she's a reason that he's always got a smile on his face and finding the good in the world. And so, again, that's something I didn't know about Walter Rouse before I showed up there yesterday. Something I know now. I've only got a million more questions, and I'll apologize in advance to the media communication staff at OU. I'll be putting his name on the availability request list from here on out, as long as he's still here. But from a wholesome discussion to a wholly useless thing, we're going to play another game, Guerin, of Guer-in or Guer-out this week.
Interesting that you would choose the word useless when you come to the Guerin segment of the Lederman Jacket. I love that. Thanks again for that, Sean.
Useless, but we're not.
Point taken. It's all right.
Something that came up because he discussed it last night, curing cancer. We're not doing that here. Walter Rouse might someday. We are not curing cancer with this segment, but we're answering some hot questions.
All right.
Of course, got to answer if you were Guer-in or Guer-out. I didn't let you really elaborate on things last week. We had to keep it tight, but we got to get out of here eventually. But feel free to offer some thoughts. So we're going to start here. An easy one. Guer-in or Guer-out, OU offense to keep up a 73 point per game pace over the course of the 2023 season.
Yeah, Guer-in. I mean, that I think is a done deal. Come on, man. How about let's reverse that? How about 37 points a game?
That would do it.
37 points a game might take Oklahoma where the fans want to see it go. Might.
Just might. I like that. Although 73 would be a lot cooler. I don't know.
73. You're talking average.
Yeah.
If this were 2008, 17, 16, 18 even, that was Kyler's year, right? 18? Yeah, that was Kyler. I actually would consider it before I'd answer. But no, Guer-out. They're not doing 73.
Maybe if they played Arkansas State every week.
Yeah.
Now, it's only been 1 week, and it only was Arkansas State. But you Guer-in or you Guer-out on the Oklahoma defense in 2023. That's broad. But from what you saw, from the feelings you're getting, it's vague. But I got to know, are you Guer-in, you Guer-out?
How about a qualifier? Guer-in compared to last year. Because, again, of the little things that I saw that I didn't see often enough a year ago. That's my bailout.
That's a reasonable one. Now, Andrell Anthony, saw some good stuff from him. Guer-in, Guer-out, him to finish as a top two in receiving yards for the Sooners this year.
I'll go Guer-in for now. Yeah, yes, Guer-in.
I can tease. I about right before we sat down here, I got off the phone with his dad. So I'll have something interesting on him at selloutcrowd.com, Eli-Lederman.com. C2 can play at that game in the next couple of days. But what he really gives them that they had in Marvin Mims, that I think they have a bit of in Jalil Farouk, but if he's going to be the number one guy, they're going to need someone else. He's the take the top off the defense kind of guy, and it took about 3 plays for us to see it with that 45-yard connection with Dillon Gabriel. So his stock rose for me certainly on Saturday. Fellow Booker T guy you should know, Gentry Williams. Guer-in or Guer-out on him as cornerback number 2, the starting guy opposite Woody Washington?
Booker T guy, that answers your question. Guer-in.
Lovely. All right, we're going to go to the college football world at large now. SMU's moved to the ACC. Guer-in, Guer-out?
For the ACC or SMU?
For SMU.
Guer-in.
Yeah. How about for the ACC?
Guer-out.
All right. Oklahoma State to have a quarterback start 6+ games this year. Guer-in or Guer-out?
Wow. This I should have done some deeper thought on that one. 6 games?
6 starts for any of their quarterbacks.
Any Oklahoma or Oklahoma State? You said Oklahoma State.
I said Oklahoma State. We're talking about Garrett Rangel, Alan Bowman, and Gunnar Gundy.
Guerin.
So you think they'll settle at some point on somebody?
Yeah, you're not pinning me to a name. You're just a number. Okay.
Nope.
Guerin.
Texas Tech, Guer-in or Guer-out after a week 1 loss at Wyoming. No one should ever go up to Laramie again. It's a scary place. It's a place where Power 5 teams get tripped up.
I think last week we brushed past Tech when we were talking about the Big 12 as getting maybe a little too much attention.
A little bit skeptical.
Yeah. But so how about Guer-out based on the preseason hype they were getting? But I'd still Guer-in based on Wyoming. Again, too small a sample size, so I wouldn't let anything that happened in Laramie think that all of a sudden the Red Raiders are going to go 3-9.
Here's a tough one. We were both there in 2021 when Oklahoma State and Baylor met in the Big 12 title game. Guer-in or Guer-out on kind of Dave Aranda and Baylor getting back to at least those heights. That was a day where we thought, those were 2 teams we felt like could be the future of the Big 12, and 2 years later, not even. It feels a little bit different.
Guer-in on the potential, right? The reality might be a different thing altogether, but between the chaos of the league, and I still think it could get chaotic. Again, nothing in week 1 leads me to think otherwise about the Big 12, Eli. I think this thing's still up for grabs. So it's the chaos of the conference even as it stands now, but when you remove Oklahoma and Texas beginning next year and you throw it into even more turmoil and carnival, I still believe enough in Aranda as a coach to think Baylor's going to be a player.
Guer-in, Guer-out, Colorado college football playoff. And I'll preface this by saying, do you believe, as Dion so eloquently asked over the weekend? Do you believe?
The coach. I believe in a coach, but he's fictional, and he coaches the other football. And you know who I'm talking about, right? Your boy over there at Richmond, AFC Richmond.
Oh, Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso could do it.
I believe in Ted Lasso. I'm not ready to believe in Dion as a massive success story again after 1 week. I think it's cool, and I get the excitement because I think it's good for college football. But for now, it's Guer-out.
We'll finish here. They were one of your CFP picks, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but feeling pretty Guer-in about Florida State after that performance against LSU?
Well, Guer-out on the team I did pick to go to the playoff, that's LSU. I wish I'd chosen the Seminoles. I am Guer-in on the Seminoles because they started pushing LSU around. It wasn't just Johnny Wilson or the transfer from Michigan State who caught the 3 touchdown passes.
Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman, right? Is that right? That's what you were telling me. It was what they did at the line of scrimmage. But I'm a little bit more worried about LSU than I am excited about Florida State, since the Tigers were my dark horse SEC pick to go to the playoff instead of Georgia and Alabama.
Florida State's really good. And when we're talking about transfers, they've really hit maybe that sweet spot. And they lucked out on guys who decided to come back, and that I'm sure helped in the portal.
Right.
They've got some of their own guys. They've got some guys who started elsewhere and are now balling out in Tallahassee. They are quite impressive. And given how Clemson looked last night, you kind of maybe start to wonder who can even really hang with them in the ACC. Mm-hmm. Too early to punt on anybody, but opening salvo, Florida State impressed. Clemson left a lot to be desired. LSU the same. Brian Kelly, big games. Any concerns? That seems to have followed him from South Bend.
Yeah, I'm more concerned with what I saw on the field than on the sideline if I'm an LSU fan. Put it that way.
Well, Guerin, that's going to wrap it for us. You're just hanging at overlooking Owen Field in Norman.
I'm still here, Eli, from Venables' press conference. In fact, the goal right now is to just stay here until kickoff on Saturday at 5 o'clock. I don't think anyone will notice if I just stay here.
I can imagine so.
There's plenty of concession.
I was going to say, there's that fridge of high noons that's open. I know you can.
Well, and I'm not above breaking a window or two also to get after.
Get after something. Okay.
Just doing some. Well, that's not a misdemeanor, though. Breaking a window at a university property, is that a misdemeanor?
That's campus police. They'll let you off.
That's a warning. Yeah. Sellout Crowd would pay my ticket, I'm sure. If I decided
you're going to have to check with the K-Man on that one. But we're going to wrap it there, Karen. We'll report back next week on your stay and whether or not you have any run-ins with campus police. But it's been the Lederman Jacket. It will remain the Lederman Jacket. You can find us, as always, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find us. And shoot, Guerin, we launched last Friday at Sellout Crowd. This is our first full game week, and we are chock full of content. We had some really fantastic columns this morning. You wrote about Arizona State, where OSU's headed this week. Barry Trammell wrote about Dirk Cutter and his little dalliance with Oklahoma State in the past. Jenny Carlson kind of compared the differences between Dillon, Gabriel, and Jackson Arnold in 2023 with Caleb Williams and Spencer Rattler a few years back. I've got some stuff going. The Hutchins brothers have stuff going. We got a lot going on at Sellout Crowd, so please visit the site, follow along, join the crowd.